The Kia EV9, a 3-row electric SUV. Yes, you heard that right. Hyundai and Kia are one of the first to market with this. And the 3-row segment, at least in the internal combustion market, is massive. So the dangerous part is when you're the first to market with something or one of the first to do something, you don't have a lot of competition. And you're gonna see brands like Volvo, Lucid, Porsche, Mercedes, and BMW all trying to compete in this space. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of what Hyundai and Kia have done here, and the mechanical discussion, and of course, taking it for a drive. So on the outside, you can tell right away it's trying to be more futuristic, and it's a blessing and a curse depending on who you are. This starts at about $55,000, and with the GT line, with more power and all the special features, this goes up to $75,000, and that sounds like a lot of money for a Kia, and it is. However, this brand knows that the average buyer of something like this is around 45 years old, so there might be disposable income. They're definitely trying to compete in a more luxury space in terms of refinement. Interior NVH levels are down. Now, hopefully beauty is beyond skin deep here, and I think it is. So when you get over the exterior styling, which is very, very subjective, from headlight to taillight design, the color, the piano black accents, and it depends on what trim level you get, of course. It dictates some of the styling in terms of wheel options as well. The interior space is where you're gonna live, and this is supposed to be a family vehicle. And when I looked at this, overall, just physically touching things, using things, I thought, you know, this is definitely a blueprint for other brands. We got it of the Blazer EV, and I got a lot of flack for saying it felt like it was thrown together. All a brand like Ford and Chevy and some of the other commodity brands that are struggling with interior fit and finish, all they have to do is buy one of these and look at it. I mean, it's incredible what they've done, and it's not perfect, but there's so many things that have been done right. Let's talk about like the doors, right? There's a physical button in switch layout for your seat heater, your steering wheel heater, your cooled seats, your heated seats, your memory adjustment, and of course your kinetics or massage or semi-massage function. Your door switches are all physical. Your steering wheel controls are very intuitive. They're not cluttered. Everything's here where you need it. Even the things like the shift into drive and park, it's kind of weird at first, but when you look at it, it's so well built, it's so clicky and solid, it's not taking up center console space, and it's just there and it's easy to use. Again, they understand where to keep the tactile feedback stuff, and they do a great job with the physicality without feeling hyper gimmicky or cheap. Now, speaking of that, yes, there are some gimmicky things here, like a capacitive layer of buttons right below the infotainment that, you know, you have your home map and all those other buttons, which are kind of touch sensitive. You know, they still try to put that there, and then right below that is a very almost lucid looking like center control panel for temperature, fan speed, and your volume knob. But again, you know, they've tried to blend the digital domain with the physical here. When you get to the infotainment, yes, it's a threaded screen. We've seen this on almost every brand. It's very stuck on the dash, and the screen quality is very good. The infotainment usability is pretty good. There's a lot of sub-menus to jump through, but I think once you get used to it, you're gonna be fine. The major snafus here, of course, are, you know, instead of just keeping a physical HVAC layout below the screen or just getting rid of the touch or capacitive touch buttons, they put it as a screen that is hidden behind the steering wheel and you cannot see it. No matter how you position yourself, it's got to be one of the dumbest ideas you can possibly think of when they were doing this. I feel like maybe they laid it out and it was an afterthought, but, you know, again, this is not a perfect interior, but there's these things still that, you know, how would I say this? They've made up for it in other ways. This center console area is a mix of creativity. You have USB ports all over the place, USB-C in the seats, in this frontal knee area that has a cargo spot down here for like a purse or a bag. The center console can be covered up. The cup holders are enormous, and then you can shrink them down with this rotary scoop system that is very creative and is very cool. It's gonna have a big wow factor, but the cup holders largely work. The wireless phone chargers in a tremendous location, and the armrest storage is average at best. Now, the big thing here is interior packaging. We talk about this with a brand like Lucid who focuses everything on packaging. Your armrests are not at an even height from your left to your right arm, so it makes it a little bit uncomfortable. And this center storage area is so immense, but it's such a wasted piece of space. You can't adjust it. And then when you get in the back, it makes a little bit more sense because they have this massive storage nook that you can slide out. It's like a tray to put stuff in the back. So they prioritize more the rear occupants in the second row for storage than they do in the front in terms of the armrest. And then there's a tray to put, you know, something on there, your phone or, you know, a book. In terms of the seats, you know, this has to have some of the best headrests I've ever been in, aside from a pure luxury vehicle, maybe like a Lincoln or a Mercedes. They are a fabric, they have a ton of give, and I think their idea to this is you can recline the front seats. And this is where things get a bit gimmicky, because they know you're going to be charging this and they want you to relax. The problem is the seat really doesn't go all the way back, and the footrest that comes up to kind of prop up your legs, you have to be like 3 feet tall to make them usable. And when you go to the upper trim levels, you get the kind of captain's chair recliners in the second row as well. And I was excited to try them because you see these on luxury vehicles, but again, it's just a gimmick, unfortunately. There's a massive amount of recline in the second row, but when that ottoman or that lift comes up for your legs, you have to be either a kid, like a really small kid, and probably a kid that would be in a car seat to make it comfortable on your legs, or if you're an adult, it literally digs into your calves so hard it feels like it's gonna break my legs. I'm gonna have a DVT when I'm done sitting in the back. Again, there's some things here that they really tried on the marketing part and making it cool, but it's not all that functional. Storage in the doors are great, front and back. The material choice, the material quality is really good. There's no creaks or rattles in the plastic. This doesn't feel like, you know, they spent $1 on all of these parts. The grills for the speakers are great. All the attention to detail is really solid. The second row comfort is tremendous. The third row has a recline, and you can see it with the strap in the back. You can kind of ratchet it forward and back so you can even get comfortable in the third row, assuming the second row seats are moved up quite a bit. The second row is electronic in the upper trim levels where they can kind of move forward or back into position to kind of move around that third row. And with all the seats down, there is a lot of space in here, but I will say, despite this being an all-electric vehicle, the load floor is extremely high. I would say with all seats down, it's not much different than the internal combustion counterparts. And when you compare it to something like a Gravity, you're going to see way better use of space, almost minivan levels of space for a third row like SUV thing. This doesn't have it. It definitely feels on the smaller side, but you can tell that they prioritized first and second row space. The second row is just absolutely enormous. You're swimming back there. If you have a car seat in the back, there's so much room. You can have your front seat up in front of the car seat, even with room to spare, and the kid's not going to be kicking the seat in the back. So, I mean, there's some really great things they've done here in terms of usability, and some things like the dashboard, you know, they could have more storage there instead of like this fancy pants looking LED lighting. They could have place to put things. The glove box is pretty small, but again, it's damped. I think you're really going to appreciate this interior space. There's so much that you can look at and play with that you're like, this is way better than some of the internal combustion cars we've been in the three-row SUV space. You just have to make sure that you're ready for the EV world. Let's get into the shop and we're going to talk about some of the technical tidbits. I'm going to hit you with some of the technicalities of the EV9 briefly. The plan for Hyundai and Kia is to build this in Georgia in the United States. The three-row market is hot here and you're going to get the maximum incentives. This is built on their eGimp platform, which is a dedicated platform just for electric vehicles, and this is the Maximus version. It has been stretched out. It is longer than a Telluride, if you can believe that. This car was designed with aerodynamics in mind. Despite it being a box, it is very aerodynamically efficient and very slippery until you get to higher speeds, and that's where you notice degradation because of its higher ride height, but they do a pretty good job managing it there. There's two battery pack options for this. The smaller battery, which is only available in the rear-wheel drive lowest trim level, it's about 76 kilowatt hours. However, it's got the highest nominal voltage at over 630 volts, so it charges the fast on a DC fast charger. From the next trim level up, it's all the larger battery pack, 99.8 kilowatt hours, and that has an even lower voltage at around 550-ish. And this is an 800 volt architecture, so they have some work to do there. So That means the bigger battery pack charges slow on a DC fast charger, and you just need to be aware of that if that's what you plan to do. At home, it's going to take about 8 hours and 30 minutes for the bigger battery pack on a 240 volt outlet at 10 kilowatts, or 6.5 hours on the lowest trim level with the smaller battery pack. When you look at it, it's strut front, but it's got a split lower control arm and an aluminum knuckle. This is a very heavy vehicle, again, over 5,500 pounds, so they need the load capacity on the knuckle, and the rear is all multi-link. You have an option for a load leveling shock in the back. This is not air ride. This increases your towing capacity as well. If you go up to the upper trim levels, you can tow about 5,000 pounds. The low trim levels, forget it. The rear wheel drive trims don't tow, basically nothing. So that's the main thing to note about this. Now, in terms of power, if you're choosing the low trim levels that are rear-wheel drive only, they make in the low 200 horsepower range depending on the battery pack, and the same torque at about 250. The all-wheel drive variants get the dual motor. They make almost identical horsepower. It's about 380 horsepower across the board, and it can make up to over 500 pounds of torque depending on the trim level that you choose. Again, you're not buying this because of power, but that's the breakup of it. Now, for more details, let's take this for a drive.
I'm late. I gotta pick up my
17 kids. I gotta
pick up how many seats back there were.
I have about 20 kids in 20 different schools, 20 states.
You've learned the David Grohl family planning method.
All right, to be fair, that's not what this vehicle is about. You can throw 3 or 4 kids in here safely, and
if you have multiple families, you can get there quickly too, right? If you need to split your time.
Yeah. You get the GT line, and you have more thrust. Let's talk about the real.
Perfect for your mistresses, right?
No, I don't think my mistresses would be into the EV9.
But you can tell them how frugal you are. This is the first time you've called me about a Hyundai product or Kia product. You're like, Jack, oh my God.
I did. I was really excited when I got in this for the first time, and then more importantly, drove it. And I think here's the fine print of this. This is a perfect example of if you don't have a lot of money for a car payment, most car payments are between $500 and $700 if you finance it, right? And then you have the level of depreciation on most cars, which is...
Yeah, they're depreciating asset.
They're brutal. So if you don't have a lot of money, you need a family vehicle, and you're on the fence about an electric car, they have lease rates at the time of this video between $300 and $400 a month. At a $70,000 trim level, you can get these subsidized for about $300 a month.
With how much down?
Like $2,000 or $3,000.
So this is basically the running cost of like a Honda Civic.
Yes, and if you really, that's the selling point of this, because they're trying to move these. The dealerships are trying to get them out there. The brand's trying to get them out there. And I know there's not a lot of margin for the salespeople right now. But if you're on the fence, this thing is incredible for a lease. Like, I would 100% for 2 years give this a shot for $300 if I needed a family vehicle, because it's going to blow everything else away, essentially, in this segment. It's so good at what it does. And
I'm late!
And it's still... It's still pretty good to drive, Like, it's still somewhat entertaining. You're not dead inside, and nobody's driving it like a monkey, but it's just quick enough. It's got all the torque you need, and it's super, super quiet, Jack. Like, ridiculously quiet.
I will say, right, if you were looking at a Telluride versus this, from a driving perspective, really the Telluride is probably one of my least favorite to drive 3-row SUVs. This thing blows that thing out of the water because it's a lower CG than that vehicle. It's got far more power. It's got not marginally, it's got better body control than that. And there are currently very few 3-row electric SUVs that exist, particularly at this price point for how cheap you can get one of these things.
Yeah.
What this thing doesn't do well compared to, say, a Pilot is some of the ride and body control of this vehicle isn't as good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of head toss as we demonstrate going over some of these bumps, meaning when you hit a bump on the left or right, you feel it on all sides of the vehicle.
Yeah, you have a lot of lateral head toss when pavement gets uneven, which is one of the negatives. Let's just get into that. Let's talk about the negatives, Jack. The first thing that we agree on is, personally for me, the steering's far too heavy for a 3-row SUV. I know we bagged on Mazda on that for the CX-50. This is needlessly heavy. It makes it more of a arduous task to get around every day.
And it's not direct.
It's not direct, and I feel like there's a lot of steering input required to get this thing to turn. You get used to it, but it's one thing to note. The brakes feel pretty natural. you know, for
Hyundai Kia does a good job with that.
The calibration's good. You won't even notice it. I would say most people are not going to notice the suspension stuff until you get into the bigger wheel and tires.
Or over really bad pavement.
Yeah, it's got that big wheel ride issue where you hit these small, like high frequency impacts, and it really does vibrate the whole car quite a bit. And I'd be curious to drive one of the lower specs with a bigger sidewall on it to see how much that helps. But I mean, honestly, the ADAS system's great. The safety stuff works really good. I mean, there's so little to complain about, and it even has a really intuitive like brake regen system. If you want to use the regen for like engine braking, you can. If you want to do one pedal driving, you can do it all through the paddles. You can switch that pretty much at will.
Any normal family SUV, particularly for $300 a month that you could possibly get. One thing I would say is, I think it would be important if you're going to use this as a family vehicle with how much head toss there is to get in the second and third row and see if you're going to make your kids car sick.
Right.
Just being in this vehicle, how much of the big seas or big waves, little boat feeling I get in this, a lot of on bad pavement, just a lot of side-to-side motion. That could be maybe a deal breaker for some people, but honestly, at least in the front seats, it's no worse than a Telluride.
No, absolutely not. And the final thing before I get into the final thoughts is I want to talk about price, because you know we're talking about for the top two trim levels at $70,000 and $75,000. That is an asinine amount of money for this. I know you're going to get some discounts on it, but I would absolutely not finance this because the depreciation
will kill you.
Will kill you. Absolutely. If you're in love with this thing, lease it, and I think you're going to be over the moon for 2 years with this.
And then they'll have another one out in 2 years that'll be even better, and then get that one.
Exactly. So, with that, Jack, let's do it. Head into the final thoughts.
All right, let's do it. Show me.
Final thoughts on the Kia EV9. Typically, when we talk about modern technology and even some of the electrified products, it seems like a race to the bottom. Every brand says, oh, we're going electric. And Kia and Hyundai have proven that they are way ahead of certain brands that have been around since the dawn of man. They have done it here, and they're really good at commodity vehicles, cars, sedans, and SUVs as it is. And now that they're committed to electrification and not just toying with it, this is an incredible product. Is it perfect? No. You know, they still need to work on this. Packaging, storage, front and rear. The cargo hold shouldn't be as small as it is for being on a battery platform. The interior space for human capacity is great, but again, you know, not every vehicle is perfect. Their tech and their safety suite works really good, far and ahead for the price of many of its luxury competitors. And the overall drivability here, they spent more time on these than they did on their internal combustion commodity vehicles. It drives way better. So if you're coming from a Hyundai or Kia vehicle that was gas, well, you're gonna be so happy with this. That's the bottom line. Battery efficiency is good, drivability is good, and almost everything is a joy to operate and use. If you're gonna lease this, which I highly recommend doing this in this first generation product, I don't know. If you have complaints, I'd like to know what they are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.